2, the Dr. Basilia deep dive for Disney Villainous here. Let's get started here. So, Dr. Basilia, he is a very interesting character because I think a lot of people watching this video are not probably watching it for the same reasons for a lot of the other deep dives that I have done so far, or / been assisted by. So I want to keep that in mind. Shout out to Cincinnatus. Dr. Basilia, to kind of break him down from a playstyle perspective, as we've always done, we're going to start with the villain deck and then go into the fate deck strategy stuff, he is a very strong, aggressive character. One of the things that makes Dr. Basilia kind of stand out compared to the rest is the fact that he can reach his win condition relatively fast. He is an incredibly strong character. I can't stress this enough how fast this guy can move. He is definitely not the fastest character in the game in terms of like going from, like actually accomplishing his goal, but he can start building up his tool set and just getting ready to rev right to the win condition and just be ready to stop anything that's in his way. So let's kind of start talking a little bit about the goal. So the goal is, if you've never played Dr. Basilia before, but I strongly recommend before watching this video that you do, is that control the talisman and successfully rule New Orleans. So how that works is that first, well, in any order, you need to play the talisman to a location in your realm and have control of it, because it can be stolen by a hero. Then Rule New Orleans needs to be played into your fortune pile, which is a very unique thing that Dr. Basilia has. Once you have that, you then need to make sure that you are at the Voodoo Emporium and play Cards Will Tell. When you play Cards Will Tell, let's say, for example, we have all these cards that are inside of our fortune pile, all right? When you have the fortune pile out, normally what you would do in a real game is that you would actually have all the cards out and then wave them out, and then you would pick 3. And you choose 3, and if one of those is Rule New Orleans, you win the game, as long as there is no negative fortune ability conditions that are revealed on those cards. But you have to have Rule New Orleans as well as Talisman under your control in order to accomplish that. Now, I'm going to go and put these cards back into their rightful places. And let's kind of start talking about the way that we get from point A to point B in a relatively decent fashion. So, the biggest thing that you're going to notice up front is that Rule New Orleans and the Talisman both are 3 power. They are expensive. Now, compared to other characters that have to play 2 different items, Dr. Facilier is actually one of the cheaper ones. Jafar has 2 items. One of them is 3, one of them is 4. Captain Hook has a 4-cost item that he needs to play to get moving. Ratigan's got a 15-coster. Ursula has 2 4-cost ones. Dr. Vasilier is on the cheaper side, but you do need to keep in mind, too, with the fact that Cards Will Tell is also in that suite of cards that you need in order to accomplish your goal. So in theory, that's 7 power. Now, it's not going to be as simple as 7 power to accomplish that. The reason being is that even though Rule New Orleans gets put into the fortune pile, the talisman can be stolen by heroes that have a strength of 3 or less. When they get played, let's say, for example, I play Charlotte. We'll ignore Charlotte's ability for the time being, even though it does something unique. As soon as Charlotte gets played, the talisman gets put onto Charlotte immediately. However, this is something that a lot of people, including myself at the beginning, kind of get tricked up by, is that even though that happens, this only happens for the first time this gets attached to the character. If I were to play someone like Ray, who is a 1-strength hero, while this is out, the talisman does not bounce to Ray. It stays on Charlotte. So you do need to keep that in mind as the fating player when you're using the fate cards, that just because you might play a hero out that's also the strength requirement for the talisman to be attached to, it does not bounce in between them, or giving out fate strategies. But also the Dr. Basilia player, you can use this to your advantage with the fact that you only need to technically vanquish the character 1 time and then bring that card back to your possession, and then you're ready to go to start playing Cards Will Tell and try to fish out Rule New Orleans. So let's start kind of talking about some of the cards and how to kind of play that out. So the biggest thing is the fact that you need to, while Dr. Basilia is a very aggressive character, he kind of also has an engine building sense to him. It's not as strong as some of the characters that we've covered in the past, like Hades, Or, you know, Prince John is also a very heavy engine building character, and Radigan to some extent also has. He's not as strong in engine as much as those characters do, but he has the cards to actually get that stuff going. So, engine cards. Let's go ahead and kind of talk about some of those that you really need to kind of get going. Illusion Powder, Kane, Shadow Man, Lawrence, and the rest of your allies that we'll gotta go over. So let's kind of talk about some of his core unique cards from the get-go. The first one that's really powerful is the Cane. We all know about the Cane. What's cool about the Cane is that it costs 3 and allows you to take one adjacent action at one of the locations. So a common thing that will happen is that you'll gain 3, you know, spend 3, play the Cane at your current location, and then take one of the actions at that location. Now, one of the questions I think people will ask is that, is it worth playing the Cane to another location instead of the one that you're currently at? I would say no. You usually want to set it up to where you gain 3, spend it, or have the power to play the Cane, and then use an action at one of those adjacent locations. Usually either to gain more power, take an action that you can't actually take at your location, all sorts of stuff. The prime places I find, well, actually, all the places for the Cane are super useful. Reason being, Bayou. So you initially will play the Cane, or maybe you don't play it, and it's already here. What you can do is that you can use the Cane to gain a power if you need to, discard cards, because the Bayou itself is one of the places that does not have a discard for 2 play cards in a 3 gain. You can also use it to play another card. That's super useful. And what's nice about the Bayou too is that if you've played the Cane to the Bayou, or it's already there, you can move it over to Tiana's place. Then from here, the most common thing I would probably say people are going to use the Cane for at Tiana's place is the gain 3. But I have seen times where what they'll do is that they want to set up the Cane because they played it at the Bayou to the parade. So they might move it as well. They might also play a card. That is also something I've noticed too. Very, very useful. Now, it's also important to note, I did not mention this, the Cane cannot be used to take fate actions. When we go to the parade, if we get the Cane over here, the most common thing that I will see happen is that if the Cane gets played at the parade, they will use the extra play card action to do something else. But one of the nice things about having the Cane at the parade is that you can take the Vanquish action here. So by default, one of Dr. Basilier's weaknesses is the fact that he actually has really good tools for dealing with heroes, but he can't Vanquish very often. So having the Cane here to be able to take the extra Vanquish action is super solid. And what's cool too is that you can go from the parade and move it over. And what's super nice about this is that, like I said, Cards Will Tell's ability can only be activated when at the Voodoo Emporium. So let's say, for example, you have 6 cards in your fortune pile. You reveal them out, you don't get Rule New Orleans. As long as the parade's top play action card is there, you can as long as you have another Cards Will Tell, you can actually play the second one and go again and hopefully grab New Orleans in the process. So you can actually take a double try at it. So that's super useful. I haven't necessarily found the Cane to do anything else super useful at the Voodoo Emporium besides play the extra card. Sure, gaining 2 is nice. Maybe if you want to move it back to the parade. Maybe if you need a discard, sure. But the Cane's really biggest use at the Voodoo Emporium is to play the double Cards Will Tell. So keep that in mind. I find it the least useful here for the actual overall versatility that it can give. But its power to be able to play 2 Cards Will Tell is still good. I would say the best places to have it are the parade and the Bayou. Which is funny because with the Bayou, you're technically actually limited with the amount of stuff you could do since it's at the corner. But since the Bayou allows you to gain 3, bam, is really good. Someone else points out too that, yeah, what you can do if you have the power, you can go to the Voodoo Emporium, and if you haven't already, play the Talisman, guaranteeing the fact that it cannot be captured, and then play Cards Will Tell. Now, you have to make sure that you're probably in a good winning position to grab Rule New Orleans, but luck is always on the doctor's side. We'll talk more about that later. So that's the Cane. Like I always say, though, do not rely on this item to win. I would say, though, that there is probably never an instance where you want to discard the Cane. This is probably a card that exists within Dr. Basilier's deck that is really good and should not be, you know, thought of less upon. And there's only one card in the Fate deck that can get rid of it. So it's worth playing. Play it. Seriously, play it. Even if you are probably going to be ready to set up for win condition, go ahead and play it to start giving yourself the better tools. No. Here we go. Let's talk about the allies first before we get into Illusion Powder. These two, Shadow Man and Lawrence. So what's really nice about Lawrence is the fact that what happens, like I said, Talisman will get attached to one of these pesky heroes. Now what will happen is that they will get played, and then the Talisman goes there. If Lawrence is already out, you can move Lawrence immediately to their location, guaranteeing essentially the fact that, all right, Lawrence can essentially kill them on the next turn, and then you can still play Cards Will Tell. Makes him super good. Downside is Lawrence is the only ally that can do that in the deck. And honestly, you don't want to try to use Lawrence to vanquish if you can any other heroes before then, because you want to have him ready to take out that hero when they might do that, when you're ready to play Cards Will Tell and try to win the game. So go ahead and play Lawrence out. He is really good. You do have a ton of other allies that can deal with 3 strength heroes and such like that. And also other tools. But Lawrence is also really good. But try not to use him to vanquish other heroes unless you absolutely need to for whatever reason. I did run into a situation. I was playing a game today where Lawrence actually helped to make sure that I had the Bayou cleaned up, especially since it was super early game and I didn't have the other tools out, or the other, basically, quest items, as some people like to call it, ready to go. So keep that in mind. Sometimes you may have to do that, so don't feel like you need to sit with Lawrence out, ready to go. But he is really good for that instance, going over here, moving, murdering, good to go. Now, the Shadow Man. Let's talk about the Shadow Man. The Shadow Man is very unique. Basically, Shadow Man is the only 4-strength ally in Facilier's deck. He does have a lot of strong allies. He has tons of 3s and tons of 2s. He doesn't have any 1-strength ones. And a lot of the heroes that exist within Dr. Basilier's Fate deck aren't very strong, so you're usually going to have the stuff to deal with it. However, sometimes there's just going to be a hero that comes out and you need to deal with them, and wherever Shadow Man isn't the best place for him. What's nice about Shadow Man is that his ability is that every time he's at the same location as Doctor, when I move to a new location, I can move Shadow Man with him. So with a lot of the 4-strength heroes, let's say probably the biggest pain is Tiana, and we'll talk more about that later. Shadow Man can be moved to the location, and then knowing that next turn, when you can, go to the Voodoo Emporium and then take out Tiana using the Shadow Man or another 4-strength hero, or anyone that's 4 or more strength with another ally attached. Shadow Man is really good in that regard. And what's also super nice too is that one of the things that the Fate deck will do is that it will put allies from the realm into the fortune pile, which stinks because you paid the money to put the ally out, and then it's getting basically discarded, and then also clogging up your Fate deck. However, if you do play Cards Will Tell, the Shadow Man is the only ally that has a positive fortune ability, where the Shadow Man will get to be played to the Voodoo Emporium for free, which is really good. Now, you inherently cannot put Shadow Man into the fortune pile, so the opponent has to be willing to sacrifice the fact that if I'm going to play Cards Will Tell to kind of go fish some cards out of the fortune deck, I can essentially have running the risk of me being able to play the Shadow Man for free. Now, he does get played to the Voodoo Emporium, so it's not like I get to play him anywhere for free, but it is 3 power. So that is something that the opponent is going to have to run risk of if they want to put him in there to try to clog the deck. So something to keep in mind as well. Shadow Man is overall a really good ally in Dr. Basilier's deck, and it's really nice that just thematically he's moving with Dr. Basilier too. It is a really solid card. It's a sleeper card because, like I said, most players will probably want to be spending that extra power on something like the Cane, or trying to get out the Talisman or Rule New Orleans, because those both cost 3 power. But Shadow Man, it comes in real clutch when you need to take out characters like Tiana or Louis, or if Naveen gets out there, Or in some cases, when Lawrence isn't available and you need to move to a location where the hero's got the talisman at, you can instantly basically guarantee that that hero is going to go away with the talisman, bring it back to you, and then you can go ahead and try to play Cards Will Tell. It's really solid. Don't sleep on the Shadow Man. When you can play him, play him. Having said that, make sure that when you do have Shadow Man, always move him with you. I know it's an effect that even I forget, but it's powerful enough that if you can move him and have control of Shadow Man at all times, you are in a really good spot to have control of where things need to go. So that way, when you run into a situation where, oh, Tiana gets played the next turn, and I forgot to move Shadow Man with me, I don't run that risk. So that way, next turn, if I am moving him with me, I can move over here, get prepped, and then take Tiana out the next turn, because you're always going to have access to your Vanquish action. So yeah, Shadow Man is really solid. All right, one of the last big cards I would say with those unique items that we're talking about is the Illusion Powder. Now, when I first played Dr. Basilia, I wrote this card off, but as I talk about a lot with all these deep dives, all of these villains want to and are encouraged to vanquish things. So they have tools in their deck to help with vanquishing and dealing with heroes that also help with their objectives sometimes. In this case, Illusion Powder is super good. So why is it super good? One of the cards we'll talk about when the allies later is the Mass Spirit. In the Mass Spirit, we'll find ways to get into your fortune pile and screw with you. And what the Mass Spirit does is essentially when it's revealed what Cards Will Tell, it cancels the ability to get rid of any cards with that pull from Cards Will Tell, as well as cancel any of the fortune abilities. So let's say if I drew Fast Spirits and Rule New Orleans, I can, and even if I have the talisman under my control, I won't be able to win because Mass Spirits will cancel out the fortune effect of Rule New Orleans, which is allowing me to win the game. However, if I vanquish something at a location where Illusion Powder is, I can discard up to 2 cards from the fortune pile and get rid of them. So, for example, let's say Ray right here has the talisman, Shadow Man and Illusion Powder are here. I have a Mass Spirit and a Mass Spirit here, along with my copy of Rule New Orleans. I go here, gain 1, I vanquish Ray. Because Illusion Powder pops off, I can discard both of these Mass Spirits into my discard pile, guaranteeing that they're going to go away. Now, granted, that's with any card too. So if, let's say if you get some other cards clogged in there, like your Voodoo Dolls, maybe some conditions, possibly if the Cane or one of your allies that you really want back, like Lawrence, you know, you can also use Illusion Power to put those back in your discard pile so that way they can cycle back through your deck. Because that's one thing that's important to note is that anything that goes in your fortune pile is not going to go back into your deck until you play Cards Will Tell or Illusion Powder or one of your conditions, which we will talk about later. So it's important to try to get those really important allies and items back into your deck so you can play them. It's super important. So Illusion Powder on its own is really solid, especially if you're in the early game and heroes are blocking your actions. You want Illusion Powder out so that way you can try to get rid of those cards that might enter the fortune pile via effects found in the Fate deck. So don't sleep on this card. It might not seem very useful to you at first, especially if you're learning the game for the first time and you're not maybe vanquishing as much. Dr. Facilier can somewhat get around some of the hero spam a little bit, but not a whole lot, which we will talk about. So Illusion Powder, use it, play it out. And the nice thing too, what I will say, is that when the Cane and Illusion Powder are out, and you pull the magic card, Juju, guess what? Instead of them having to choose, oh, I'll just get rid of the Cane, or, oh, I'll just get rid of Illusion Powder, they have to choose which one to get rid of. And especially if Juju is played to get rid of the Illusion Powder, you still get to keep the Cane. Or if they use Juju to get rid of the Cane, you still have Illusion Powder. So having those items out is really good. It is very, very, very good. So keep that in mind. This card is really good. Play it. Now, having said that, one of the things you'll need to keep in mind with Illusion Powder is that if you play it early, it also kind of acts as a counter against the heroes. So, for example, let's say I play Illusion Powder to the Voodoo Emporium. My opponent is going to be less willing to play heroes to that location because if they're going to be putting cards in my fortune pile, I can go here, instantly play a Mass Spirit, take out Ray, and then instantly pop Illusion Powder. So the opponent is going to be more willing to play Ray or another hero to a different location. So keep that in mind. And then if you combine that with the fact that, let's say they place Ray here, for example. If I have the Cane here, I can use the Cane's move action, do that, play the Mass Spirit, take out Ray, still pop the Illusion Powder. So yeah, Illusion Powder is really good. Not only just for getting rid of the cards, but also doing some countering, because the opponent will be scared of that when they're trying to put more cards in the Fortune deck. So this card's really good. All these unique items that I'm talking about with Dr. Basilia are really solid cards. They are very much the engine building cards of his deck. There are some other things, shenanigans with some other engine cards that we'll talk about here in a second. But these are all really good. You don't necessarily need to play him like an engine building character. I wouldn't suggest trying to play all 4 of these out and then try to go for the win. But if you can get 1 or 2 of them out, you know, it's probably a good idea if you can. The other 2 I would not just flat out discard unless you don't, if you need to kind of rush towards your objective to win, and you know you can, then maybe. But I would strongly not try to discard any of this stuff, and try to play it if you can, but still try to conserve the power. Now let's go ahead and talk about these allies. So we have some more allies that's left, and there's actually kind of another one with the frog form, which we'll talk about. So there's 3 copies of all of these allies, which is kind of nice because in theory, Dr. Basilia has a lot of allies. In total, he has 11, which is a lot. If you count the frog forms, that's 13. Now, why these allies are pretty good? Number 1, 3 strength is really solid in Dr. Basilia's deck. 3 strength will basically take out anything but 3 of the characters. What's nice about this too is that there are no fake cards that will buff the characters inherently. They can only get rid of allies, which is nice. So with these allies, we have the Shadow Spirits, which they're 2 cost, 3 strength. The only thing that they do have is that if they do get put into the Fortune deck, if they get revealed, they will make you lose 2 power. So they have an inherent negative effect. But Dr. Basilia doesn't necessarily have a huge power problem unless you get spammed early, which we'll talk more about that later. But these Shadow Spirits are really solid. On top of that, the Voodoo Dolls are really good. Number 1, they don't have a negative ability towards the Fortune deck. So if they get put in there, it's not horrible. On top of that, they actually play a little control. So what's nice about them is if they get played, and let's say, for example, Ray's here. I can go here, use the move action, move the Voodoo Dolls, and then I can choose any hero in the realm and move them forward in that same direction 1 space. So if Ray was here and I wanted him to go away, I could do that. Or if Tiana was at Tiana's place and I really want to free up the Tiana's place for my next turn for whatever reason, I could do that as well instead. So they also play a little bit of control because Dr. Basilia will have a little bit of a problem if heroes start covering a lot of actions early. And especially if you want places like Voodoo Emporium, Bayou, maybe you want to make sure Tiana's place has a discard action available. You want the 2 power gain at the parade available. Voodoo Dolls come in handy for that. You don't necessarily even need to use them for vanquishing, but they do come in handy, especially if they are played to a location with a hero, and then you want to move them out. It's really good. So keep that in mind. But do also keep that in mind with the fact that the parade, you can't play them inherently, unless you have the cane, and then move them. You will need to play them there first and then move them out of the way to prepare. So it does take a step for it to work. But what's also nice about them too is that, guess what? They are 1 power, and that is like not a lot in Dr. Facilier terms. So, and since a lot of the heroes are 2 or 3, this is usually pretty easy to get them out and play around that. Now, with that, we have the Mass Spirits. Now, the Mass Spirits are really good and also really bad. Like I said, if they get put into the Fortune deck, they inherently make it a lot more difficult to pull off your win because they will cancel out the ability to win, as well as any other Fortune abilities that you may pull with that if you're not going for Rule New Orleans. So, but the catch is they don't cost anything. So, inherently what I could do is I can go to Voodoo Emporium, play the Mass Spirit to a location where the hero is, and then take and vanquish for free and not have to spend any money to do so. It is really solid to do that, and I would go ahead and try to do that. One of the nice things about this too is that there's only 3 cards if these guys get played into the realm that will actually put them into the fortune deck when playing them out. You are more likely to actually have these guys be put in the fortune deck from Almost There, which, to talk about it really fast, is essentially a card that allows the opponent to take the top 3 cards of Dr. Basilier's deck and place any that can be into the fortune pile. So these will probably get placed in there via that effect, minus Juju and, what is it, Evening Star, as well as Juju. Because one thing you might notice, Mass Spirits actually has the item portion on here, so Juju can actually take them out with Juju's ability. So do keep that in mind, but it's super awesome to have a really cheap ally out in the open. And sometimes, too, you got to keep that in mind that when you do this and they pull something like Evening Star and Tiana, they might be tempted to do Evening Star over Tiana, which both of these are technically bad, but like I've been kind of talking about recently with some other characters, making your opponent have to make decisions when they fate is super important. Because even if there's a better choice, making them think, especially what's based off in your hand, is really good. So even if you think it might be a bad idea, play the Mass Spirit out if you can, especially to save money. Even if you're at the Bayou, gain the 3, and then you can have the Mass Spirit out essentially for free. Or if you go to the Voodoo Emporium, you can go take out one of those cheap 2-strength heroes, you know, use the Mass Spirit to do so, still net yourself a power in the process. There's lots of ways to conserve power using the Mass Spirits. Now, on top of that, too, you got 2 copies of Frog Form. So what Frog Form actually does, you can actually play that onto a hero for free. It is not an ally, and if this gets placed into the fortune pile, it has no negative effect. So it's super helpful, especially if you want to kind of combo off of, let's say, Tiana's here, I play a Frog Form, and then in combination with maybe a Mass Spirit, I'm basically taking Tiana out for 2, because Frog Form's reducing the strength by 2, and then the Mass Spirit will take them out for the rest of the strength. Now, someone says, I don't like exposing Mass Spirits on the board. Well, here's the thing. Like I said, in that situation, they have to make a choice. They're going to choose. And the thing, too, is, guess what? If they start putting heroes out, you have allies out on the board, and you're conserving money, so that way, if you do need to spend a more expensive ally to take out that character, you have the money to do so. You can't, with Dr. Basilia, you can't necessarily play super conservative. He does have control cards. The Voodoo Dolls are really the only one to deal with that control of mitigating heroes that get placed out on the board. You know, I rather have to force my opponent to make a decision of playing a hero. Well, granted, Juju's not the best example in that case. But like something like Charlotte, do they really want to play Charlotte and put 2 cards from the top of the deck into my fortune pile? Or are they going to take that Mass Spirit and put it in there? There are 3 copies of Evening Star. That's the thing you got to keep in mind. So they might risk it and put this out there, and then guess what? You can go over and try to take them out with the Mass Spirit. So you can't always play super conservative with Dr. Basilia, because if you play too conservative with Dr. Basilia, that is one of his weaknesses. He does not have a lot of control, and if you let too many heroes get swarmed on the board and using their effects and all that nonsense and getting rid of and all that stuff, he gets screwed over. Very, very bad. That's actually a really good time to talk about this. Dr. Vasilia's greatest weakness is the fact that if you lose the ability to vanquish stuff really early and don't have the ability to play allies out to stop that, you will get destroyed. Even something as simple as in this situation, if I get rid of all of my allies and you just remove Tiana's ability, pretend that's Naveen, and we'll go ahead and grab Naveen wherever he is. Oh, there he is. You just have a 4-strength hero and a 1-strength. Covering those actions is super detrimental to Dr. Basilia. He's losing the ability to gain 2 power and play a card at this location. He's losing the ability to gain 1 and discard. Because like I said, Dr. Basilia does not have a normal gain 3, play 2 card discard spot that a lot of villains in this game do have. That is kind of important, because if he's trying to fish for a Rule New Orleans or Talisman or a Cards Will Tell, he loses the ability to do that and fade at the same time. Then if he wants to discard, he's only going to gain the ability to move, especially if this one's covered. Even if we take that out of the picture, Voodoo Emporium. You have to be able to guarantee the fact that you play Mass Spirits or something like that to make it worth your while to take out these heroes. Same deal with the Bayou. Gaining 3 and then playing only 1 card is pretty bad. You know, you want to be able to play 2 cards with Dr. Basilia because he can gain a lot of power because of the fact that a lot of his cards don't cost a lot. There are very few cards, mainly his key unique items like Talisman, Kane, Rule New Orleans, Illusion Powder, Shadow Man, and Lawrence are the named the few. The only other one that's super expensive is the Shadow Spirits, but overall his deck is relatively cheap or doesn't cost a lot. And he's already gaining a lot of power from these other options right here. And there's another card that literally gives him power and there's no detriment to it really. So when he gets the board swarmed by even just 2 heroes, he's losing a lot of actions and he is forced to try to start vanquishing as soon as possible. And the thing too is that he's kind of got something similar where, let's say if you're trying to play really aggressive like Maleficent would, where you're playing really aggressive, you're not playing allies out, and you're just trying to grow really hard towards the goal. You get Rule New Orleans early, you want to discard and try to find a talisman, and then go for the kill at the Voodoo Emporium with Cards Will Tell. All of a sudden, you get the board out. Oh, that's gone. I discarded literally about half of my allies. They go away. Then I have to actually play an ally here to take them out. Oh, opponent gets to Fate me next turn, pulls another card to stop me. All that good stuff. You know, yeah, you can't do that. You got to play some allies out and start putting that. And yeah, I see someone that says that's not how Mal should play. Both of those characters, yeah, you don't necessarily want to just go 100% aggressive, but they want to move fast. Because once you start not moving super fast with these characters, they get behind. Even because they both have aggressive playstyles. They both want to move towards their objective as fast as possible. The more conservative that you play with Dr. Vasilier, you have to get lucky in the fact that you are going to be able to vanquish on the next turn to take out the character with a talisman. And at this point, the thing is, if you aren't vanquishing, a lot of the cards that exist in the Fate deck will stack the fortune pile. Now, one thing that Dr. Basilia does have that is a bonus is that, let's say I stack a bunch of cards into the fortune pile. You know, let's just pretend all of it's this. Even if we got all the mass spirits in there. That is a 14-card fortune deck. Let me actually flip it around. Right there, I just won. Right there. There were 3 mass spirits in that deck. Even if you stack that thing sky high, he has luck on his side. But the fact that that's going to, how often that's going to happen, and watch, I'm going to actually do it again. Watch, it's going to happen again. Likeliness of that actually happening is not very often. So you can't rely on the luck all the time. So you got to keep that in mind with Dr. Basilia. So you have to go for the vanquishing. And the thing too to keep in mind with that too, you can actually get into a point where you will lose. This is also one of those unwinnable state things that will barely happen. That was scripted. That was not scripted. That was totally not scripted. I shuffled that. You all saw that. Because if all the frog forms get in there and all the allies get in here, the only hope that Dr. Basilia has to take out that hero that's got the talisman on them is to hopefully pull the Shadow Man and get those cards back and flowing through his deck. So it's not necessarily unwinnable, but it basically makes it very hard for him to actually accomplish anything. It's very difficult. And especially with more cards using stuff like Almost There, pulling the 3 cards that you just put back from the Cards Will Tell, those will immediately get put back in there at a very high rate. So you need to keep that in mind with Dr. Basilia. You got to get rid of these heroes. Now, the thing is, you don't necessarily need to get rid of them all the time. He is still very aggressive towards his goal. So if you feel like you can go here, gain the power, set yourself up to go over here, even if there's a hero out here or here, you don't necessarily need to worry about them going away. Maybe if you have the tools to do so that turn, go for it. But don't necessarily, like, guns a-blazing, go super scar heavy and try to kill the heroes. You really should try to make sure that you can control the board state as much as you can. Especially because some of these characters by default will actually force you to want to kill them. Tiana, for example, is going to make it so that Cards Will Tell is going to cost you 2 power. Where is she? Where is she? or what is it? Actually, we'll talk about that one in a second. Mama Odie will make it so if you have a 3-card fortune pile, Mama Odie's going to make it 2. So your chances of actually being able to pull Rule New Orleans is lower, as well as if you're trying to fish bad cards out of the fortune pile before Talisman is played or something like that, also is lower. Another card too to keep in mind that's pretty bad is that I just pulled out is Eudora. If Eudora gets the Talisman, she acts like Olivia, where she gets to pull another fake card from the top of the deck, and there's a huge chance, and granted I didn't shuffle this, that you'll pull one of those heroes, so when she gets defeated, you play the hero, immediately gets to play them. On top of that, if you're doing it at the Voodoo Emporium and you're like me and earlier forgot to fate first, guess what? You lose your ability to fate. Now, granted, that's a human error, but still. That is super, super important. Super important. Like, you need to take these guys out as fast as you can. But you also got to keep in mind that you still got to be relatively aggressive towards your goal, because once you start playing too much control, you might be in a winning situation based off how fast how slow the opponent's moving. But usually if you're playing against a faster character like Hook, if Hook is able to block 2 of your locations and you're not taking them out early, Hook is going to win. Same deal with Evil Queen. If Evil Queen can stop Doctor from taking a lot more of the actions and he can't defeat this stuff right away easily, because even then too, if you want to make sure something like Tiana goes away, those 2 play card actions, you're going to burn those 2 play cards where you want to play Talisman and Rule New Orleans. So you got to keep that in mind with some of the stuff that's going on here. Let's talk about some other things. Friends on the Other Side. Shoutouts to probably one of my favorite pieces of art in the game, period. The lighting on this, the way this looks, there's a reason why this is an emote in the Twitch chat. I love the art on this card. Why this card is so good is literally because whenever you play it, or however it gets played into the fortune deck, it is always going to benefit you. Playing it cost 0, you're going to gain 2 power. If for some reason you are still like finding Rule New Orleans and you have 2 of these in there, you can spend 1 to play Cards Will Tell to gain 4. So you're literally gaining 3 in the process. Or even if it's just 1 and you're just fishing crappy cards out of there, you can spend 1 knowing that you're going to guarantee to at least gain 2, as long as there's not a Mass Spirit. But yeah, it's really solid. I strongly recommend when you play this to play it. Having said that, though, when you're in the later game and you're trying to get ready to win, these are probably better to be discarded than played unless you're really desperate for power. You have to keep in mind the fact that they do go in the fortune pile. So if you already have 3 cards in there, playing Friends on the Other Side will actually decrease your chance of pulling Rule New Orleans. So you will need to keep in mind the fact that in the later game, once you're trying to get ready to win, this card has actually kind of lost some of its ability to do whatever you want it to do. So do keep that in mind. Now, I do want to talk about some other cards here, besides some other strategies, before we kind of round out Dr. Basilia. Because like I said, Dr. Basilia is overall a very powerful character. Even with the stuff I showed off there, luck is always on his side. He has lots of tools that, as long as they are played and used to some extent, they are relatively good. Talk about Sleight of Hand. I am actually not a huge fan of this card. I find this more detrimental than anything, but sometimes you do need to use it. The problem is that this is a fishing card. Essentially, if you're trying to find items that you desperately need, you can use this to grab 3 cards, choose 1, and discard the other 2. I find more often than not that the other 2 cards that I discard are still something I want to use. So Sleight of Hand is probably only something that after I played my key items and some of these other stronger unique cards, that's when I'll play it. So like maybe towards the end of the game, I'm trying to find Cards Will Tell or maybe some allies or something like that. That's when I find it useful. But early game, I really don't like using this. I actually kind of feel better playing more stuff out or gaining power and such than actually playing this card to fish. There is a situation that I've seen happen. It doesn't happen very often, where the 3 cards you pull, 2 of them will be Talisman and Rule New Orleans, and you are forced to discard 1. Do note that if you are forced to be in this situation, discard Rule New Orleans, because there is a condition that can help get it back. Discarding the Talisman is going to be very detrimental for you. So that in that case, you will literally have to cycle through your entire deck to try to get it back. That's not necessarily the whole reason why I don't like playing this early. I just feel like more often than not, the cards I want to grab from this and are all useful, and I don't want to discard. Because I've actually had times where I've had Cane and Talisman, and then I'm like, I really don't want to discard the Cane, but I have to grab the Talisman. Or even if it's not the Cane, it might be some other useful ally or something like that. So yeah, this is more of a later game card than anything. Well, that's all the core cards. It's these two. These are two relatively decent conditions. However, I found it more in the competitive play. This card right here kind of gets played around a little bit more because opponents are scared of it. Let's talk about Terror first. When someone gains 3 power, which will happen quite often with a lot of characters, you can grab back an ally or an effect from your discard pile and put it into your hand. Super good. Allows you to grab back cards will tell. Allows you to grab back any of the allies. This includes stuff like Lawrence, which is super helpful to kind of get those cards back out into play. I really wish I knew where Lawrence was right now, but hey, what can you do? Lawrence right now is probably where he belongs, captured, and probably put in solitary confinement. There he is. There's Lawrence. Super good card. And then also if you want to grab, like I said, grab back an effect, you can grab back one of these cards will tells. If you need to grab back Rule New Orleans from a bad sleight of hand, you can grab it back that way. Really good. It doesn't let you grab it doesn't let you grab back items. So if you do lose the Cane or Talisman or Illusion Powder this way, it doesn't help you there, but it definitely is really good at recycling and grabbing that stuff back. Now, Desperation. Desperation is also really good for Dr. Basilia. Who it's good against is more the fishing characters, stuff like Jafar, a little Ursula, maybe Hades, characters that are really looking for items that have to dig a lot for it. Desperation is really good. Because reason for that is if a player discards 2 or more cards from their hand, Dr. Basilia can take a card from the fortune pile and put it into their hand. Really solid play to grab like one of those mass spirits and get it out of there, and then literally the next turn go play cards will tell and win the game. It's really good. However, I have found that certain characters that don't necessarily have to fish as often, aka Captain Hook. Yeah, Captain Hook doesn't have to grab the map, but his deck is so consistent he doesn't necessarily need to discard 1 every time, or 2 every time. My bad. So he can kind of get around the fact that if he only needs to discard 1 card, he'll only discard 1. Other characters that always kind of have really good cards, like Scar, I can work around that as a Scar player against a Dr. Basilia. There are plenty of characters that have really good cards that are consistent that won't pop this very often if they want to play it smart. The nice thing, too, about Desperation 2 is that if you draw this early, you know, the only time you really want to use Desperation is the grab back stuff that you aren't wanting to actually, like, get rid of. So, for example, that friends on the other side situation, where I have 2 friends on the other sides, Desperation may help if I need to grab 2 power, but do I really want to do that? Same thing with stuff like, you know, if there's nothing in there, usually what's going to happen is you get these early, these aren't useful. So it's not like Scar's Pride, where that's always going to be useful for you. Desperation requires some type of already, like, quota to be met in order to actually play this card. Well, Pride doesn't. So Desperation does require a little bit of, like, actual setup for this to actually be useful. And the opponent, if they really want to, can play around that. So just be careful with Desperation. It is still a really good card. It just, like, in a competitive environment, that is definitely going to be looked at and be like, really don't want that Mass Spirit to go away. I'll discard 1 card. So just keep that in mind with Desperation. If you find yourself in a situation where these conditions won't be popped off against a character based off a situation, go ahead and get rid of them. You still have lots more valuable cards that you might want to play and grab from your deck. All right. I think I've done enough talking. I might actually have to go grab some water after this. That is Dr. Facilier. He is a very strong character. All of these cards are very good. Super solid. I still find Dr. Basilia one of the most fun players, one of the most fun villains in this game to play, just because of the fact that his play style is so cards, like working with cards with the fortune pile. playing stuff out, playing a little bit of control with the allies and such to vanquish things. And all of them have really kind of cool gimmicky effects that work well towards his goal. But yeah, Dr. Vasilier, he's really solid. I really like him. He's a lot of fun. He's got lots of really aggressive tools to kind of go towards it fast. You need to play him fast. He doesn't need to play super aggressively fast, but he does need to play fast in order to be successful in this game. That is Dr. Basilia. All right, so I already see some questions, so I'm gonna go into this. So the first question I see is from Purple Potato. Thinking about running pocket of Facilier, do you favor certain matchups for the Doctor? So one of the things I would say about what makes Dr. Basilia really strong in the matchup game is the fact that there's really not a bad matchup for Doctor. A lot of them go in his favor, if not 50-50. So I actually talked about in the Scar deep dive how I think Scar edges out a little bit against Dr. Basilia, but it's not necessarily like a bad matchup for Dr. Basilia. He can still win it. All the slower characters, Jafar, Ursula, maybe to some extent Hades, maybe Prince John, depending on who you're playing against, he can really give them a run for their money. Like he basically makes them like, all right, you really need to be playing the every second turn fate game while progressing towards your goal, and in order for him to just kind of go, because since they're slow, if he's able to control those allies, he's still going to run away with the game. Captain Hook is actually a relatively even matchup for the two of them. What I found at first is that if a Hook player isn't playing Fate correctly against Dr. Basilia, and we'll actually talk about this with the more fading strategy against the Doctor, that if Captain Hook is playing more dumping a bunch of cards in the Fortune deck, Dr. Basilia will run away with the game. However, if Hook is playing where he's playing heroes out instead of stacking the Fortune deck early, Dr. Basilia will have a hard time. And that is honestly with a lot of these characters too. If you do play the heroes out instead of playing towards the Fortune deck and stacking it, Dr. Basilia will have a little bit more of a struggle. But the slower character, he has the advantage of the fact that since his goal is so quick to accomplish, because of all the tools he has to try to kind of get there, he's really good. Some of the other powerful characters, Ratigan, these two kind of go hand in hand, pretty 50-50, but it's really always not tight-knit. I'm trying to think if there's a matchup I haven't really seen. Dr. Basilia favors in Corella. He goes Pete and Dr. Basilia. Dr. Basilia usually rules the day. Evil Queen and Dr. Basilia is an interesting matchup. I do think, depending on how fast Evil Queen is playing, she edges it out, but if Dr. Basilia is able to kind of do a relatively consistent Fate game against Evil Queen, he can kind of edge out on that matchup too. He's got a lot of it's not necessarily that he's got a lot of strong super strong matchups. It's more the fact of how does the opponent want to play against him. That's really what it is. But if the opponent is playing wrong or too slow, he'll just take the game. He'll just take it right away. One of those two things, he will just run away with the game. Anyone who can play at a moderate speed, though, will give the Doctor a little bit of a game. Just because the fact that if they're playing against him correctly, which we'll talk about, he definitely gets slowed down. When you did the Hades strategy video, this is also from Fluffy, by the way, you intentionally talked about Chariot last. Here you talked about the Cane first. Was there any reasoning behind that, or did you see the very big difference between them? I would say with the Hades thing, the problem with Hades is a lot different than the character, because Hades, like with Dr. Basilia, there's probably a very clear way to play with the character. You got to play fast and aggressive towards your goal and have a little bit of control when things kind of go wrong. I talked about the unique items mainly because they are all very unique, and talking about those first kind of all engine out into how all these kind of play. So, like, I would still say I have won many games with Dr. Basilia where the Cane was not out, where Shadow Man was not out, or Illusion Powder was not used. Same thing, or like using Lawrence to do his movement ability. I don't think he relies on these items to win. I know a lot of people really want to play the Cane here to do like the double cards will tell thing, but honestly, relying on that strategy or having that be an option, especially when we got to talk about fading, is not as often as you think. But just talking about the versatility of these cards, because what's nice about them is that they're versatile, minus the Cane. They have lots of versatile tools. people talk about with Hades that you have to use the chariot to win. That's not the case. You don't need these cards to win with Dr. Vasilier, but they're so versatile in what they can do and how they can be used that knowing what to use them for is actually a big strategy to make sure that you get the most out of them if you're going to play them. Because I do think all of these do have a place and purpose to play them. I just don't think it's like you need to play all 4 of them out to win, to get an engine going. Because like I said, he's not necessarily an engine character, but these are definitely engine tools. Personally, I played against Jafar with him recently, and Deception really hurt me. Every time I regain control of the talisman, Deception is played, and it's gone again. Yeah, you do. The problem is that, you know, with those kinds of setups, you can't necessarily rely off the fact that the condition is going to pop. Now, Jafar is weird because he has ways of playing Deception multiple times, you know? But Jafar is still so slow, and you have to remember that Deception is only 1 card. So if you get something like Evening Star, you know, as long as it's not necessarily a mass spirit, you know, it's not that bad. You know, it depends on kind of your board state. Like if they're playing Deception early because you have 2 items out, it's really not that big of a deal. You know, maybe late game it's worse, but, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say that's still bad for Dr. Basilia. I really don't think so. I had to learn to play fast Gothel in order to stand a chance against him. Yes. Any person who wants to play against Dr. Basilia has to play fast. And there are definitely certain characters that cannot play fast. Gothel, like in the example that Shattered Ice brings up with Gothel, you would have to be playing a bunch of turns where you're swinging for trust. Characters like Hades would literally have to be playing almost the opposite way that I talked about, which is more consistent, where you basically have to rush to play as many Titans as possible and get ready to rumbles and hoard power. And then the thing is, if Dr. Basilia Fates gets a go the distance and destroys that, guess what? You're screwed. And you have to play on the luck of the draw that you don't get those cards. So, and same thing with Ursula and Jafar. Like, if you are playing aggressive Facilier, even with what was talked about with Deception, now these characters play slow. Like, they have to play a fast game. I did win with Ursula recently, twice, against a Dr. Basilia, but that was more the fact that we'll talk about Ursula at a very lengthy later date. Ursula has to get lucky and gain the power that she needs to play her items without much hassle. To win against Dr. Basilia. You have to play fast against Doctor to win. Maleficent is not the same, because like I said, Maleficent is still aggressive, but the thing that Maleficent has that Doctor doesn't is the fact that the Fate deck kind of counteracts the fact that when you play a curse out, there's a lot of counters towards playing a curse. Well, Dr. Basilia, the only counter that there is that when you have the talisman in Rule New Orleans, you just need to play a hero to get control of the talisman. So that way it forces you to defeat the hero and not be able to play cards will tell on the same turn. So there's that. So Purple Tato says, I asked because I think Doctor will cover a bad matchup for my main. Interesting, yeah. Honestly, like I said, Dr. Basilia overall is probably still one of the strongest characters in the game. I think we can all attest that right now Hook is that spot, but I know some people still say that Dr. Basilia is probably the strongest in the game right now, especially after some kind of poor turnout that we've had from Evil Queen, especially from the tournament. And Doctor kind of reigns supreme in a lot of sense there. I still think overall, Dr. Basilia does not have any bad matchups. He really doesn't. Even like when I talked about Scar, I do think it edges out in Scar's favor a little bit, just the fact that if you're playing incredibly aggressive Scar from the get-go, he can Fate and then still actually keep Doctor at bay. But yeah. Mass Spirits are currently the only card in the game that has 2 card types at once. Do you think that has a big impact on the game? Nope, I don't think so. I really don't think so. If you really are talking, maybe Jafar, but like I said, that's really not going to matter too much because, I mean, I've actually, when playing a lot of Ursula recently, those Fate condition cards are good, but sometimes they playing only 1 card and its effect isn't necessarily that good. It really isn't. Yeah, Facilier is always on my radar when considering other characters. Yeah, he's really good. We're talking in my mains pool, which is changing a little bit, but Dr. Facilier will still stay in that ranks. He still will be top 4 or 5 characters in my pool of characters that I run. And it's because all of his tools are just really good. They're really solid. He really does not have anything bad in his deck. Do we have any other questions? I'm trying not to chug too much water here. I can tell that my doing 2 streams definitely gets to my throat a little bit. So. We'll talk about fading strategies here in a second. I'm going to see if anyone else has any villain strategies, though. Yeah, I think, yeah, because that's the thing, is that, like, I know Prince John's been on tear recently, but Facilier is such a good counter just from the fact that he never really needs to hoard power, so greed doesn't pop, and the fact that Dr. Basilia can just run away with the game. Like, even if he's fading Prince John, like, Prince John has to take a lot of time to get to the point where he's gaining the power that he needs and trying to stay at bay. He just runs away. Here's a question. Do you always discard the mass spirits? No. There are times that I do discard them. It kind of depends on my board. If I have enough allies to kind of do some hero coverage, I will discard one. But I will sometimes keep one handy in my hand. Now, if you just draw 3 of them in your hand starting turn, yeah, discard them. You don't need 3 mass spirits in your hand. Because what's nice about that is that if you do discard the mass spirits, nothing can touch the discard pile to put them in the fortune pile. So, but I don't necessarily recommend just dumping them because you still need power and a lot of power to play Talisman and Rule New Orleans, as well as some of the other good stuff that you might want to play. And keeping this in hand to go take out a hero that's blocking stuff. Because something else you guys got to keep in mind. This location, this location, this location have all the extra other gain powers for Dr. Basilia. If all those get covered by heroes, you will need to have efficient ways of getting rid of the heroes that get placed there to gain power back. And guess what? Frog form, friends on the other side to some extent, and mass spirits will help take care of that. Yeah, mass spirits are great to be played vanquishing same turn. They are. I readily admit that. That is one of their big advantages. Because they are essentially act like a frog form. But I still recommend maybe at least playing 1 out. If you can do a spread of 3, what's nice about spreading 3 out is that that's going to be way too many fade cards for them to try to get rid of all 3 of them. I have too much ditto luck when I play a Dr. Basilia. He makes me feel too uneasy when I win. I might win or might not when I play Cards Will Tell. And also, one thing I forgot to mention with Cards Will Tell, do not be afraid to play this when you are not at win condition based off what's in your fortune pile. If there are like 4 or 5 cards on the fortune pile, including Rule New Orleans, but you don't have Talisman out yet, play Cards Will Tell to get rid of that crap. You want that fortune deck to be as thin as possible so you know that when you play it, you have a really high chance of winning. There have been plenty of games because of me doing that I guaranteed win condition by having 2 cards in there, and it was Rule New Orleans and some other card that wasn't Mass Spirits. Because you got to remember that too. Cards Will Tell also has the benefit of, let's say, friends on the other side, if they get rid of, let's say maybe a sleight of hands in there, as well as if the Shadow Man's in there. It's really good. Oh, I already turned the term Ditto Luck. Yeah, there is a thing called Ditto Luck. And Let's Get Wicked. There is such thing. We need a Ditto Luck emote. We just got to get his little picture that he has of Roxas. Oh, as I bang my thing with my water bottle. And just like make that an emote. That'll have to be a thing. I'll have to find a way to do that. Make that of something. All right. I think that's enough on Dr. Vasilier's villain deck. I could take a few more questions after we talk about the Fate deck. But that is Dr. Basilia. So, let's talk about fading Dr. Basilia. Something that I know a lot of you probably have on your brain after I talked about how good this guy is. So, I'm going to point out the number one thing that I see players do that I think is now a big no-no when playing against Dr. Basilia. As someone points out, as I bang with my thing, as I talk about my water bottle. Yes, I know. I apologize. Sometimes we have some not safe for work comments that are accidentally made on Let's Get Wicked. They are not intentional. Sometimes they are. So here's his Fate deck. He has a lot of heroes. actually more than the average. He has 9. Most villains kind of tap out around 7 or 8. He has 9. What's interesting about Dr. Vasilier is that these two right here, I feel, get played way too much in the early game. Here is why. For example, let's say you draw almost there, and let's say Naveen. Maybe it's like your first fate or second fate. You might be tempted to almost there and go ahead and get rid of those cards and put in there. Here's the problem with this. In this instance right here, let's just pretend that not all these cards are out. All right, move all these cards away. You might be tempted to play almost there, but here's the problem. Yeah, you're going to put 3 cards into the fortune deck, but like I said, Dr. Basilia has the power of luck on his side. You guys saw the fact that from a 14-card fortune deck, I literally was able to play Cards Will Tell and still win the game. There were also 3 Masked Spirits in there too. Here's the thing. When I start playing heroes to block common places where the Dr. Basilia player will want to go, mainly probably Tiana's place and the Bayou, and then maybe the Parade, depending on maybe where Dr. Basilia is and where other heroes are, you start to notice something. You start to notice that Dr. Basilia starts having a hard time trying to do things. Because even though, so unlike what I would say Scar, where he really heavily relies off those extra play cards that are at the top in his realm, Dr. Basilia really does need these extra actions. He needs that move. He needs that extra play card. He needs to be able to discard and gain a money. You'll notice that I already talked about all the extra gain monies besides the Bayou are at the top. Playing the heroes and blocking those, it doesn't matter who they are, and maybe if they'll even burn their abilities, so even if it's like Big Daddy, like, covering those actions is really good. And then if you get the bonus of stuff like Mama Odie or Tiana or even Lewis, like, oh my god, you get extra stuff. Because, like, one of the things with these abilities and stuff, their passive effects become even stronger. With the fact that Doctor now has to work around that. Tiana makes everything more expensive. Mama Odie makes it so even if you're trying to early game fish stuff out or late game fish stuff out, with Cards Will Tell, you do one less. And Lewis just flat out makes it like, all right, you got that hand of 3 Masked Spirits and you want to go fate me? Guess what? You got to go give me one of those cards. Or you move him here and you want to go gain 3 power. Guess what? Same deal. He's just almost essentially like, it's funny enough that they're both alligator crocodile. The same thing with Captain Hook, where Captain Hooked with TikTok will discard the entire hand. Well, Lewis is like, all right, one of those cards that I could put in the fortune deck, especially if it's a Masked Spirit, that's going straight in there. Placing those heroes out is really good. I know Almost There, and to some extent Evening Star look really good, but in the early game, playing these heroes out to block this stuff is really good. Once you at least have 2 heroes out, and you know Doctor is having kind of a struggle to try to get anything going, then Almost There, kind of, and the Evening Star comes in handy. I know maybe sacrificing an Evening Star with like Naveen seems really dumb, especially if there's a Masked Spirit out there, but as long as you play Naveen to the location where the Masked Spirit's not going to do anything, you got to keep in mind that Naveen is 4. So that's going to take at least 2 cards to take him down. Even if that means he has to go to the Bayou instead of playing Rule New Orleans and Talisman or whatnot, he's going to have to take out Naveen, or maybe play those to get rid of Naveen so that way he can at least fate or do something, because he knows for a fact that if he plays a Talisman, opponent's going to go over there and fate, grab that, and now he doesn't have extra tools to take full advantage of the Voodoo Emporium or something like that. And that's not just for there, it's for any of those locations. Playing heroes early and then going for that dumping of those cards is nice. Now, granted, stuff like Charlotte is nice because you can play Charlotte out and do both at the same time. But, there's only one of her. There's not 5 of her. Keep that in mind. It's also nice that, like, we talk about crap about Olivia. Eudora is super nice. Not only the fact that you can actually steal a talisman with her, but because when you vanquish her, you have that chance of pulling a hero. Because, like I said, of a 15-card Fate deck, there are 9 heroes. There are only 3 of those heroes that can't actually capture the talisman. It's Naveen, Tiana, and Lewis. Everyone else can capture the talisman for themselves. So you have a pretty good chance, if the rest of the heroes are still on the deck, to capture the talisman again. And on top of that, you got some nonsense like Ray, where if you pull out Ray and another hero, you can play both of them at the same time. Ray is probably super beneficial in this instance, where if you get to play both the fake cards, it's super nice, because then you can gain both bonuses and not have to risk the fact that, oh, I'll cover up some actions. Oh, then I can use Evening Star. Oh, I can use Almost There. Or I can play another hero and do some more damage. So he's probably the most useful in that regard of those types of characters. I believe there's only, I think Sleepy's the only other one that acts like that. Chat can correct me if I'm wrong, though. There's probably someone else I'm missing. But yeah, they're really good. These fake cards are really good. These heroes are really solid. Like lots of stuff like that. All that good stuff. Can you play a card or discard cards before Lewis' ability triggers? TikTok says Hook must immediately discard his hand. So it's when Dr. Basilia moves to the location. So as soon as that moves to that location, it pops off. So there's not anything that you can kind of move around it. It doesn't necessarily say it, but it's basically implied. There's nothing that you can really do. I mean, the only gamble is that you are able to go to, like, let's say, you know, the player knows Lewis, or the player knows that the player needs to discard. You know, they might play Lewis here to guarantee that one of those cards you can't get rid of it. But, you know, you might move here. There's all sorts of, like, weird shenanigans. Lewis is such, like, he's very much like TikTok, where wherever they know the player wants to go next or needs to go to the most desperately, they'll play Lewis there. His ability doesn't come in super handy in the early game, because as long as you are able to, let's say, like this scenario, there's no other heroes, you can actually kind of deal with them relatively easily, because he has high enough strength heroes to take him out pretty easily, or allies, my bad. But like once you get in the later game where there's another hero or two out, like that becomes a little bit more of a pain. So yeah, it's pretty bad. So Lewis doesn't seem that great early game, but he's definitely very powerful. I know one card that I would like to talk about is Naveen, because I think in terms of the entire Fate deck, Naveen is probably the weakest card, but I do want to say this. The reason why he's weak is because his ability only is really useful when there's a character with a talisman, let's say it's Eudora, and they're about to be vanquished. You can play Naveen and move them away, so that way the player has to essentially play or move an ally to that location and take out the hero. Otherwise, this isn't super useful, or maybe it's another powerful hero like Tiana that he's going to move away. But, like I said, maybe in the early game, depending on who else gets pulled out, like let's say in this instance, no items are out and you pull Naveen and Juju. The fact that Naveen requires 2 cards to take him out is super good. I would probably play him over Juju. Don't let Juju's ability go to waste. And sometimes maybe in the case of Charlotte, if you think that you might be able to block a spot for a while, maybe play that over Charlotte. So that way you can gain the extra time that you need. Because instead of going to the Bayou and playing both of those, well, it depends on the situation. They might want to try to take out Naveen to try to get rid of him as soon as possible, so he's not blocking that. Because as soon as he gets played, you get to play another hero. Then you're in. Then the player's in for a problem. So that's what I would say. So overall, there really isn't necessarily like a true core strategy, but this is what I will say. His engine, he actually is an engine-based fader, where that's how you should fade him. And it's not necessarily for the fact that these cards benefit because they're out there being passive. It's the fact that these cards come in more favor towards the end, where if Dr. Vasilier isn't able to get all of his action economy to gain power, play extra cards, move stuff around, etc., then you could start screwing with him with Almost Theirs and Evening Stars, and then take more advantage of like Juju and Charlotte's ability, because they will actually block his ability to do extra stuff. So play heroes early, block the actions. If you do that, I promise you, this has turned matchups around. Where I actually thought at first that Dr. Basilia was better than Hook. And because Hook is able to play heroes out earlier and try to stop Dr. Vasilier's action economy, and like I said, Dr. Vasilier actually has to go out of his way to vanquish stuff. Now, granted, most of the heroes are pretty weak, but you still got to burn a card to go take them out usually. So, there's still the benefit there. So yeah, that's kind of the deal. Now, the strategy does work, and it definitely does change matchups to help kind of go more even. But having said that, luck is on Doctor's side. If Doctor's moving fast enough, even with this situation right here, if I'm not vanquishing these two heroes, I can still, it even doesn't matter the placement of them. Dr. Vasilier can still run away with the game. So you still need to be kind of on your toes and kind of be careful and kind of really evaluate different situations. I strongly recommend that unless you kind of can guarantee that you're going to pull a lot of mass spirits from almost there, don't play this unless you think you're desperate and you need to try to stop a Cards Will Tell. So that is my opinion. And there you go. That's how you fade Dr. Basilia. Do we have any questions from the chat? Any questions at all? Does that make sense? Because I will tell you up front, this strategy right here will change. Like, if you are scared of Dr. Basilia, this will at least make your games at least closer. If not, you actually will start winning with your characters. Because I will tell you up front. As a Scar guy, this changes the game completely. It slows Dr. Basilia down enough where if Scar needs to take more time to vanquish more stuff, he actually has a much greater chance. And because of that, that actually goes in his favor. Because like I said, Scar is already incredibly aggressive. So you got two incredibly aggressive characters trying to go towards their goals as fast as possible. It really puts the matchup in a different perspective. So, now that doesn't mean you need to fate spam Dr. Basilia. Because like I said, Dr. Basilia still has the power of luck on his side. And if you're playing all these low-cost heroes too early, you get into situations where you need to play a low-cost hero to steal a talisman. You pull Almost There, Evening Star, or another strong hero. You basically can go over here, Rule New Orleans, talisman's out, Cards Will Tell, bam, win the game. So you got to be a little careful on that. There is a little bit of timing when it comes to trying to fate the Doctor. I will say that as well. Okay. That is the deep dive strategy of Dr. Facilier. Still think he's one of the strongest characters in the game. I strongly suggest that if you don't want to play him, look out on how to fade him. Because he's really good. He's also really fun to play. People are going to play this character. I like playing this character. So if someone is in a competition or in a tournament, you're going to be seeing some Doctors. He's incredibly fun to play. I would not sleep on him.